Hello kids, Mr. Ag here. For our reading today, we are going to be continuing our studies of women's history in March by reading about another woman, another very important woman, who is profiled in our book, What Would She Do? 25 True Stories of Trailblazing Rebel Women. Today's focus is on Florence Nightingale. She was a trailblazing nurse. Florence Nightingale is famously known as the Lady of the Lamp because she visited hospital wards with her lamp held high. But did you know that before Florence, nursing was a profession that the public looked down on? She changed all that, founding modern nursing, setting standards for sanitation, and improving healthcare for all. There's no way of knowing how many people she helped to make and feel better. So here we've got Florence Nightingale. She was born May 12th, 1820. So that was about 201 years ago. She died August 13th, 1910 at the age of 90. Her nationality was British and her profession was nurse and statistician. Okay, so I think I've mastered this today. So let's see. There we go. Florence Nightingale, who was actually born in Florence, Italy, was the younger daughter of two rich, cultured socialites. Her Cambridge-educated father taught her and her sister Parthenope. They learned math, philosophy, history, and a bunch of languages too. They were lucky. Girls didn't usually get such a top-notch education in the early 19th century. They were both a prize catch for any man in want of a wife, except Florence believed that God wanted her to be a nurse, and if she were a wife, then that's all she could ever be. Rich Victorian wives weren't allowed to work, so she turned two men down. There was another problem. In early Victorian times, nurses had a bad rep. Most weren't properly trained, and the hospitals in which they worked were filthy. Florence's parents didn't approve, but after she went to Germany to train as a nurse and returned to care for her father, he changed his mind. Florence was a natural, so she promptly got a nursing job in London. In 1854, war broke out between Britain and the Russian Empire in the Crimea, a peninsula in the Black Sea. Across the water, injured soldiers were being cared for in terrible conditions. Nurses were urgently needed to help. There were no female nurses in the Crimea, but that didn't stop Florence. She found 38 volunteers, trained them, and they set sail. When they arrived at the British hospital in Scutari, now an area of Istanbul, Turkey, Florence was horrified. The conditions were appalling. The wards were filthy and overcrowded. Rats and cockroaches and lice, sorry about the delay, spread disease. Meanwhile, patients were dying from typhus, typhoid, cholera, and dysentery, and so were the staff. Yet, even though Florence and her nurses cleaned the hospital and washed everything in it, still soldiers were dying. Even more astonishingly, more were dying in the hospital than on the battlefield. Why? The mystery was solved when it was discovered that the hospital was built on top of rotten old sewers, which meant that the water was infected. When the sewers were cleaned, survival rates leaped upward. Florence's efforts had brought results at last. After the Crimean War, Florence was famous. Queen Victoria thanked her by giving her a brooch and a large sum of money. She also asked Florence to improve conditions in other army hospitals. Florence looked at the statistics and figured out that the deaths were caused by dirty conditions, poor food, and disease. So she fixed that. Then she used Queen Victoria's money to fund St. Thomas's Hospital in London and to start a school for nurses. She went on to write about caring for patients, introducing the idea that hospital wards should be bright and clean, with different wards for different illnesses. Her recommendations are still followed today. In 1907, Florence was awarded the Order of Merit, recognizing her distinguished service as a nurse, the first woman ever to receive the honor. And every year on her birthday, nurses celebrate International Nurses Day to remember the woman who boosted their profession so much. So let's just take a look back at when her birthday is. So May 12th, 1820. I bet if we look at our calendars, we'll see that that's International Nurses Day, May 12th. Here's a picture of the Lady of the Lamp, Florence Nightingale. Not a picture, an illustration. And a quote from Florence Nightingale, "I think one's feelings waste themselves in words. They ought all to be distilled into actions which bring results." So she says, less talk, more doing, more action. What would Florence do? Question. Someone you love is ill. You're really worried. When are they going to get better? You hate to see them so sick, and besides, you miss spending time with them. What would Florence Nightingale do? This is a no-brainer. Florence Nightingale was probably the world's most famous nurse, so she would try to make them feel better. If she had to go to school like you, this might mean visiting them after school or on the weekends. Perhaps she would take along board games or books. Maybe she'd just chat. But she'd do whatever she could to make her patient feel happy and hopefully healthy soon. And that is another installment in our studies of profiles of important women in our history from the book What Would She Do? 25 True Stories of Trailblazing Rebel Women.